Hello and welcome back, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed your quick break. And people here in Berlin, I hope you guys interacted with the community, blockchain community, and interacted with our thought leaders and learned quite a lot. So let's head to our next interesting segment, which are the panel discussions. So as the first panel, we have Diksha, who is the podcast host of Voices of Data Economy, and she's also a part of Asia Berlin team. And we have Stepan here. And instead of, Bruce won't be joining us. And instead of Kamal, we have Stepan over here. And we'll be joined by two of our guests. So please welcome Diksha. Stage is yours. Do your thing.
Thank you, Saurabh. And indeed, these are my two digital identities, the podcast host for Voices of Data Economy and here my role at Asia Berlin. So first of all, I would like to thank Berchain for organizing this program, and we are glad to host you again this year at Asia Berlin Summit. So how do you really have a blockchain summit without talking about data? Well, the answer is clear, you don't. So that is why we are going to talk about data ownership and other topics related to that in this panel. And for that, I have three phenomenal speakers with me. I have Stepan from Affinidi, I have Joachim from Lohkamp, and also Marvin from Phala network, which you heard in this morning as well. So data ownership. I'm sure it has a different definition for all of us, but probably it's best to hear what our panelists think about it. So an open question to all of you. What does data ownership mean to you? And how are you working towards it in your respective roles at this point in your organizations? So let's start with you, Stepan.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for introduction. I will just start briefly with how we think about data ownership and also identity, digital identity, which is kind of the concept which might be hard to digest, but actually it's quite simple. Identity is just some identifier. It may be your name, it may be your phone number, your email address, your blockchain address, or anything else, and then a set of attributes that are associated with this identifier. So identifier plus attributes. And then as internet, so before internet, we used to control our data. So there was maybe centralized repositories, but all documents, all information that you have, you could, I don't know, store it in your safe or on your desk. But as internet evolved, due to business models that were on the internet, especially advertising business model, there was a huge push towards centralization of this data and identity management systems. And today we end up with a situation where actually most of our data online is not controlled or even can be accessed by us, owners of that data. And this is the problem that we generally try to solve. There's a lot of different segments. So we work with governments, for example, so helping governments to decentralize identity and credential management. We work with enterprises because enterprises don't want to have liability over customer data, especially if they are not, it's not their business model. If you, I don't know, sell, if you're a transport company or a bank, owning customer information and customer data is not your primary business. So it's just a liability for you. So if you actually give control to the customer, it makes your life easier as an enterprise. And then lastly, the third segment is just decentralized internet, Web3, blockchain space, where I think the innovation rate is the largest, but obviously it's much smaller than governments or enterprises.
Thank you. And we are going to probe you a lot on all these terms that you used in the intro, Web3 and etc. So, but before that, let's hear what Joachim and Marvin have to say. So I'll start with you, Joachim.
Yes, hello, first of all, and thanks for having me on the show here and for organizing this great event. I guess at Jocolom we've been working since 2014 on basically data ownership. It turned out basically that the identity part is the tooling that allows you to manage your data. And I guess there's a whole philosophical question around, can you own data, which data should be owned by you, etc., etc. What, from a personal perspective, interested me a lot was the concept of the power dynamic behind information in general, and what you could see specifically also in the business world, but in general, that people tried to collect data and hoard it and protect it. And that was pretty much the culture also still in companies, even when there was more and more digitalization of internal processes with the intranet, etc. There was always these kind of silos within a bigger silo, and it was very hard even within a company to access data. And I think that's a challenge, and it's a danger even for every organization, because the value is not necessarily only hoarding. So hoarding of data is basically, it guarantees you that you're not interchangeable as easy, but the value for the company is actually when you have like all your data and you can contextualize it and learn from it and make it accessible to your colleagues. And from this, we actually identified like how can we make sure that we can make data accessible, and that's the company perspective. But then obviously there's like the individual and like how we interact with the world with our private data, and there's the whole privacy aspect, and do we really want to give our data away to just be able to shop something online, etc. And then we need to ask our question, is it necessary to give this data away or not? So this is like where we come from, and why it's so important for us to address this topic of data. And yeah, I will come back in a bit with some more depth, but I don't want to take too much time, so I pass it on to Marvin.
Thank you. Indeed, we'll try to cover both aspects, personal data and also from the organization level. But before that, I just want to check, is the audio clear for everyone? Okay, awesome. And so Marvin, tell us, what is your definition of data ownership and how are you working towards it?
Thank you. The reason why I'm quite interested in privacy-related topic and the data ownership is because after I graduated, directly working at these internet companies, and during the job, I actually I can see how things work by internet companies, how they use the personal data from user end and to promote their productions, which is a good way to use. But after intelligence, AI comes out, this becoming a little bit scary, because they can meet out your personal activities, trends, what food you like, where you go and where you want to go, something like this during this platform. And this makes me, a little bit don't want to work for them anymore. So I jumped into a new area, which is Web3, to work on how to avoid such things happen in the future. And to make sure that happen, I think private data, the ownership should be controlled by the user end, which is the data owner, by smart contract, not by the legalment user agreement in every applications. Because the user agreement in every applications, which everybody signed yes, is weak. The control between the data ownership and via this way is quite weak. So I think smart contract is more, is a much more better way to protect the personal data rather than user agreement. And to make sure that happens, we need to use the trust base of blockchain, and we need some privacy enhanced technology to help this to help to protect the data private. So yeah, so that's where Phala comes up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And both of you spoke about Web3. So a quick show of hands. How many of you are aware of Web3 here? How many of you can explain Web3? Okay. So indeed, probably you both or three of you could explain, but I would shoot this to Stepan and Marvin, and starting with you, Stepan. Your profile says that you are helping Web3 eat Web 2.0 on LinkedIn. So if you could start with how would you explain Web3 in simple words to us? And what's your pitch for Web3 and how is it going to eat Web 2?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. I don't have a ready answer. I think the simplest definition would be that Web3 is just open source version of what we have in Web 2. And by open source, I mean not only the code, not only how it works, but also the business model and the kind of the data ownership behind it, and the decision making and the governance. So it started. So Web3, it's easier to understand this trend in dynamics in history. So internet began, it was initially decentralized. There was a few people, I don't know, universities exchanging information. Then it became large industry. Google and Facebook and all those companies were created. And they obviously had to invent some business model to sustain their growth. And this is the way how they became so huge. And they are corporations, and they exist to maximize shareholder return, and they have very closed and protected decision-making process. So it's a usual corporation. But what initially blockchain and Bitcoin showed is that we can have processes and we can create public goods, we can create services for people, or algorithms can create services for people that are completely open. So Bitcoin is the first example where monetary policy is actually open source. Before that, all monetary policies were created by central banks. After Bitcoin, now we have a lot of DeFi applications. So we have banks, we have insurance companies, we have money management or exchanges or different services. All of them are open, and all of them are protocols. So if Google is building a stack of technologies where they own each part of that, so Google Search, they have servers, they have algorithms, they have UI or website that you go to. In Web3, those are stacks of open protocols that different people built. And the reason it is taking off now, so open source existed way back, like Linux was open source, so it exists for 30, 40 years, the concept itself. But only with existence of blockchain and an ability to create business models that support open source, now we have this radical or huge growth of innovation. So now you can build open source protocol that maybe stores customer data, or it creates an exchange of value, or it creates decentralized autonomous organizations. That and you're not doing it just as charity, just for free. You can actually make money on this, and you can create tokens, and people would use those tokens to, or buy those tokens to use your protocol. So it's kind of Web3 is solving three problems one by one. So first problem, it's decentralizing value. Instead of value and money being solely controlled by the government, now it's open source. Anyone can create their own, I don't know, version of Bitcoin, or they can see how exactly monetary policy in different blockchains works. Second, is decentralizing identity and data. So instead of trusting Amazon, Facebook, or Google to store your data, you can actually do it yourself, encrypt your data, and then have it stored in decentralized network. And third, which is, I think, just starting, it is also decentralizing organizations. So we now have alternative to traditional corporations. We can have, so Bitcoin it doesn't have CEO, it doesn't have like, I don't know, any company that is responsible for it. It's just community of people, and it's self-organizing. And it's actually, in some ways, it's already more efficient than corporations, just because people are, incentives are more aligned, basically. There's a lot of things that goes into creating DAOs, and we're just starting with that. But combining those three aspects, value, data, and organization of people or coordination of people, that is, it was still long, but that's the shortest definition of Web3 I can think of.
Okay, no, I really like it when people break down things, and you broke it into three: decentralizing value, decentralizing identity, and decentralizing organizations. And we hope to cover all three of them. So Marvin, do you agree that these are the three wins, or rather say beginning of wins of Web3? Or do you have something to add here as well?
Yeah. First, I think Web3 is the like bill of right in digital world, and as I explained in the presentation earlier, I think Web1 actually already described how should the internet looks like, not what should what are the internet looks like. But Web2 like kind of destroyed the spirit. So I think what is Web3 is actually they are helping to build the internet as the founders of Web1 spirit. And actually I think I also think the laws are not built to helping the stronger power people. It is built for the for the general people, for the people who doesn't have money, for the people who are in weakness. So, but in digital world, like the capitalized companies and the hackers, the developers, they are much more stronger than the general users. So if they wish, they can actually use the database to do many things. But I think the one of the major goal for Web3 is that even though you don't know anything about technology, even though you don't know, your technology or even your development skills are not strong, but you're right to protect your own data, your own privacy, or other rights in digital world can also be protected well. I think that's what Web3 is built for, not for the stronger people or society or organization, but for the weakness ones. That's my opinion about what is Web3.
So even if you don't know anything about technology, after this session you should know, and you should be able to protect your data, knowing about Web3. So I think I have to take a little test. Who all attended Kamal's presentation in the morning? Okay. But this is Kamal. Okay, so I really need some participation here. So what is your understanding when you hear the word digital identity? Okay, here we have Nimish.
I think the online identity that's my understanding, but it's not like I have any control over it. I just use it to log into various services and apps that I use. Yeah.
Okay, that's the language we understand. And then we have Martin here as well. I know all their names because they've been around.
It could be also a DAO, for example, like a self-governed mechanism online, like an algorithm or an AI that lives online and is sovereign.
So he's the techie here, as you can see in his answer. And then we have Amrita. She also...
Well, this answer would be blockchain for dummies answer, but I mean, I've just moved to Berlin now, and I just realized that my passport is not biometric. I'm from India, and the Indian passport is not biometric. Does that count as a digital identity somehow if it were biometric? I'm not sure. So,
Okay. So I see some expressions here. So it's okay, you as well. Great. Please
About
introduce yourself, my dear.
my name is Camilo,
Okay.
Matrix Technologies. About digital identity, I was thinking, for example, as how you interact with the physical world and the systems and institutions, but also with the digital world. So as we have password accounts to access to different platforms, etc., how we can like unify all that digital footprint that we left behind into one single maybe a wallet, into one single hash, into one single ID, or with yourself, and how can you interact with institutions, digital platforms, etc., like with yourself. So maybe like technologically unifying all the systems and modules into yourself could be something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a legit problem, and thankfully there are people helping you. And that's why we have Joachim from Lohkamp and also Stepan from Affinidi. But I'll start with Joachim, So you are working towards, at Lohkamp, decentralization of digital identity. And as you can see, there are very varied definitions and problems that, people in the normal, who are not really into the tech scene face. So explain us with some use cases and work that Lohkamp is doing on ground to decentralize digital identity. And also, if possible, you could touch upon some of the answers that our audience also gave.
Yes, thank you. Before I jump on this, I just would like to address one more thing regarding the Web3.
Sure.
Because Web3 has been mentioned as like, the new web, and that it will be the infrastructure, and that it also provides now a business model that is open source. In relation to identity, I would like to emphasize very much that it is of utmost importance that the core layer of digital identity is business model free. Why is that? If we have to pay for our identity, this is already setting up a lot of conflict around the globe. Because when we talk about digital identity infrastructure, we cannot think of it as a German problem or a European problem or an Asian problem, or it's a global problem that we have to solve. And what is of utmost importance is that we think in this and approach it in a way, how can we make sure that once we get there and have like a global, equally accessible digital decentralized identity infrastructure, how can that look like, and what are the base pillars? And the Web3 is awesome, and it brings like, a lot of potential and possibility in regards to trust and verifiability, etc., etc. But we definitely do not want to tie a business model or any one blockchain to our identity. So our identity should be, if it really belongs to us, it should be able to communicate and interact with any type of network or blockchain. And that can be both Web 2 and Web 3, by the way. And it will be not so realistic to switch from Web 2 to Web 3 from one day to another, or even 1 year to another. There will be a transition phase to it. And there's still on the Web 3 side, when we think in terms of data privacy, there's a lot of open questions that are handled quite differently or approached differently also in different parts of the world. So that just to address the Web3 point. And then in general, how we would see digital identity is that it's definitely, it needs to be standards-based, and it needs to be secure, and all these aspects need to be developed. With the decentralized identity, it's also interesting maybe for the audience to understand in which phase we are. So when we started at Jocolom to work on identity, we were still talking about autonomous identity because the term self-sovereign identity was not yet coined. It was coined by Christopher Allen in 2016. And then it took some while, and then today it's like kind of the agreed term that we discussed this topic on. But still, we are in the phase of standardization. So the verifiable credential, which is like, one spec governed under the W3C Foundation, and the DID, Decentralized Identifier Specification, that is just about to become a recommendation. And we are not yet at the adoption phase. So we still are in, let's say, the phase where it's the R&D phase. And here in Germany, the government has actually bought into this new technology and has set up a lighthouse project for secure digital identities that went through a competition phase last year and now went into the implementation phase. It will last 2 to 3 years. And here we have probably around 100 partners from universities to public sector to larger companies and startups like us, working on open source approach to basically bring digital identity to the state that it actually can be used by a citizen in a safely manner. And this is like kind of the stage where we are right now. There's a few use cases out there with like minimal amounts of users that use SSI today. But in the phase, generally, we are still in this R&D phase.
So.
And yeah.
No, please continue.
No, I just wanted to help, to ask you for help for the questions because I cannot recall them all now.
So we wanted to know the use cases, but you said they are just there with limited number of users. But if you could give some examples of the use cases that are already there for decentralization of digital identity.
Yes. So within the this German Lighthouse project, there are about 40 use cases that will be explored, and they range from the health sector, how to govern your data, health data, prescriptions, etc. The mobility sector is a big one, and that really includes anything from car sharing or ride sharing, all the way to having your digital identity in your car and anything that's related to that. It's about charging your cars, etc. Then we have the public sector itself as a huge use case. So if you have been in Germany and trying to register and know like how decentralized the public sector is running to all the different offices to get your bureaucracy done, it's quite an effort and time consuming. And here your identity will basically help that you can carry these documents in a digital form with you, that you can use online services and don't need to go anywhere. And the big win is here that this information is verifiable and trustable.
Thank you. Good to know that Germany is sort of the front runner. Can I safely say that?
One of them, but so the just to give a number, it always helps a little bit. So Germany put like 65 million into this project, so it's quite significant.
Okay, that's good news. And also, Stefan, you at Affinidi, you have also a lot of Asia-related projects, and probably you too are working towards decentralization of digital identity. So tell us some use cases that we can relate to.
Yeah, it's always it's easy to talk about potential use cases, and actually, every person I met in digital or self-sovereign identity space, like it's usually this journey when you still learn about how it works and then why it is needed, and then it clicks, and then like people start producing hundreds of use cases every day, and that is actually hurting or sometimes not very useful when you, I don't know, building a company or building a product, because you are not focused and you're thinking about all these great ideas. Implementation real world, however, is a little bit harder, because fundamentally self-sovereign identity is a network technology. That means that it's not like if you create a smartphone, you can build it and sell it, and here you go. And if it's good, it will become popular. If you're creating a network, you need to basically you're creating a 3-sided marketplace, or maybe even 4 or 5-sided marketplace, and it's hard from business standpoint, because you need to have issuers of the digital data or digital documents on board. For example, governments or companies, maybe I don't know, car sharing companies or DMV or whoever is issuing driving license, or healthcare institutions. Then we need to have people who will use this data on board. So they need to have smartphone, they need to have special application on that smartphone, or maybe it has to be Google or Apple who make it part of native part of the operating system. And lastly, you need verifiers, so other organizations that would check for it. So if I have my digital passport, I don't know, the shop where I go to and buy a pack of cigarettes, and they want to check my age, they would need to have some software to actually do it. And we see this problem with vaccination certificates and QR codes. Even if that is not decentralized, it's still there's still a lot of issues at airports, and because of like it's hard to distribute technology evenly for 8 billion people in one click. To name a few use cases, what we're working on, obviously vaccination and test certificates, that's the big one, and it's happening all over the world, and there's a few large projects that Affinidi has. One of the biggest is the Common Check, so it's a vaccination application and verification for United States and also in United Kingdom. And there's some other companies that are doing it in using SSI technology. And the good thing about this technology is because it's based on standards, as Joachim said, that means that 2 different implementations of the same standard would be interoperable. So you don't need special integration. Another big area of focus is just employment. So we have quite large project in India where we help migrant workers to get employment records. So just documents that they don't have ability to receive today, and then to get access to different services that this information provides. So banking, insurance, healthcare, everything else. So it's more like building some initial use case, but then once you have some data that is digital, verifiable, and decentralized, you can build a lot of use cases on top of that. So if you have medical data, then you can use it to enable travel, to enable storing and sharing of healthcare records, to enable I don't know, checkups or insurance. If you have employment data, you can then enable hiring and financial services, and also access to everything that requires some proof of financial information. So use cases are almost unlimited. Anything that you can think of in form of paper credential or anything that is used in bureaucracy today, it becomes a subject of or object of self-sovereign identity at some point. However, how we get there, that differs. So sometimes in Germany, I think we're very lucky here because there's support from the government, and I think 65 million, it seems like the largest government investment in this area out of all the countries that I know of. But there's also purely private use cases that are run by enterprises. And then, yeah, lastly, or what we started with, Web3 use cases, those are actually the fastest to get to adoption, just because you don't need to wait on anyone. You don't need Google or Vodafone or federal government or anybody to actually adapt and start using this technology. You can just build it, and if it's useful, people will use it, as happened with NFTs. People love NFTs, people love collecting stuff, people love art, and it just took off, and adoption was much quicker because you don't depend on the government in this case. And governments in general are very slow. That's what they need to do.
Yeah. I mean, but good to know that you're implementing so many of them already, the use cases. And also, I just want to say that please raise your hand whenever you want to ask a question, because we want to make this panel really relatable to everybody. And I'm glad you spoke about different players in the ecosystem and also the Googles of the world that need to be involved. And I think one of the important things for us to understand is that what is the role of big tech when it comes to the entire decentralization and decentralization as such, because you see they are also Microsoft is working with DIF, and but on the same hand, I think a colleague yesterday told me that don't use the word centralization of data, but used federated data rather, of how big big tech is dealing with it. So I just want to understand that what's the role of big tech when it comes to decentralization of digital identities or datas, and how is this going to play in the ecosystem? How dependent are we on them, and who wants to take that up? It's actually an open question. Yeah, sure. Joachim.
Yeah, so I think there's not one answer, but there's different players out there. I definitely, you mentioned Microsoft, so they have been co-initiating the Decentralized Identity Foundation, and they are quite progressive in this field. And obviously, Microsoft has like from the past not always like the best reputation. They had a change. Quite significant change moving towards open source, so we need to see where that goes. However, on the good side is that they are supporting the decentralized identifier status, where we have at the same time, really right in this moment, more or less happening some objections to concluding the DID standard. And those are surprisingly coming from Mozilla, Google, Apple. And so they basically formally objected at the W3C, and it's now on a really high level to go through these objections and form an opinion if they are justified or not. But there are partially vague arguments to it that basically, in general, the DID standards is like, or relies on proof of work, and that obviously is an ecological problem, or would be if that would be true. But obviously it's not, because you can implement DID without using a blockchain. At Jocolom we have like two. We have one Ethereum based for more organizational use, but then if you use our smart wallet, we have like a micro-ledger system going where you're completely agnostic and independent from any blockchain at all. If some people are interested, so there has been a well-written article by CoinDesk as well as Coin Center on the topic. But here you can clearly see there is something on stake here. And the larger picture would be, we talked about business models before, but decentralized identity, if it is implemented in a business model free way, then it would take some existing business models at risk. And that's obviously not in the interest of everyone. So it's a very interesting time right now.
Indeed. And also it's like so interesting to know that it's an ecosystem. You can't do with them, you can't do without them. So we will eventually evolve into an ecosystem that learns to work with each other. So I think we have like 10 minutes, but I really have two questions that I want to ask. And one is towards you, Marvin. We are pretty much aware of the GDPR regulation in Germany and, aware of what's happening in Europe and also somehow to the impact it has on Silicon Valley. But you are joining us from China. So tell us something about what is the regulation scene there, and also I just read it this morning, the personal information protection law and the government regulation when it comes to data ownership and protection. Give us a quick overview of that.
Sure. Thank you. First, although the founder like me and Han are based in Beijing, but Phala Network is not aiming to just serve for Asia market. It's a global and permissionless protocol. So anybody in any country can use it actually, and it doesn't belong to any organizations. The network. This is the first comment, but I understand your question. In China, I think it is starting from GDPR and CCPA in Silicon Valley for the private data laws, and I think there is a new data bill created in this year to it looks very similar to to GDPR, but it also have some terms who say that the country should the data should not the sensitive data in some certain enterprises or in certain markets should not leave the mainland. Looks very familiar with GDPR agreements and terms in Europe. So I think the three major market or aliens already have this similar data private protection laws, and but in my opinion, I think this is stressed by laws. As I mentioned before, I think although enterprises will follow them, will rebuild their system so that they don't against the laws. But I still think that relied on different nations and countries creating such data protection laws is not a limited solution to protect people's data. One reason I mentioned this is because all of these three major laws, GDPR for Europe, CCPA US, and the Chinese data protection bill, all of these three laws, all of them mention that the most sensitive or the data shouldn't leave this area, which is is not seems right to me, because I believe that the final control right of this data can only belongs to the data creators or the data owners, not should be stressed by any country or government. So, for example, if I am using Google and I should be the data owner of all my historic logs in Google. And if I want to transfer this data or enable some American applications or China applications to use this data, I'm the guy who have the final control, not any governor. So this is my personal opinion. And this is very interesting because I think the final digital bill will be written in smart contracts, and this version can only be, work or guaranteed by blockchain technology, not by by these different laws. They all have their politics purpose there. So and I also have a very interesting I heard some interesting news before is that based on GDPR, Ethereum Foundation is against the GDPR because in GDPR it requires the European users' data can only be hosted in European servers. I think these kind of stuff are pretty tricky. So it's good. These data protection bills are all good, but it's not the final solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And indeed, I think laws in some way or the other also help us in controlling our own data, so that's important as well. I really wanted to cover one question on DAOs, and Martin is going to be very angry that I'm not able to do that, but you have our panelists here to continue that conversation. I would I think like to end on a concluding remark from three of you, probably two lines each, is that we cannot really do this alone. And we need an ecosystem, we need a community for this. We need to educate users, we need to bring everybody together for this to be able to control our own data when it comes to users. So at an organizational level, what are some of the initiatives or one or two things that you all are doing to create a more conscious and aware ecosystem, or what can be done rather? So with you.
Yeah, I can start. And I think I can even touch a little bit on that topic of DAOs that we won't go deep into, but
sure.
There's a famous saying, I don't know who said that, but products, and especially bugs in products, usually reflects flaws in organizational structure. I think it was someone from Microsoft, but I might be missing it. So if we're talking about decentralized products, they cannot be created and maintained efficiently by centralized organizations. They have to be, the organization that creates product has to be decentralized. And that is much harder. Building anything decentralized from technical standpoint, from organizational standpoint, from financing standpoint, from, I don't know, knowledge sharing standpoint, decision-making standpoint is much harder because instead of one point of decision-making, you have, well, everyone. And yes, democracy is slower and harder, but the reasons why it's better. Or at least, well, okay, it's not about politics, but about creating software. So that is super important, and this is very complicated topic, and there's a lot of problems that we need to go through to solve this. So what Joachim, for example, mentioned, the standards battle. It is always painful. There's always a lot of opinions. All of them have to be taken into account. There's a lot of politics happening between large companies, large governments, and individual developers who have, well, different interests and different level of influence. But this is the only way we can get to the system that is actually shared and trusted by the whole world. It won't be Microsoft to Google or Facebook or any single government saying that this is how things should be done. Just trust us and then give us all your data. So decentralized governance and decision-making and organizing people and organizing open source community to work on a specific problem and just coordination is much more important topic than I think anything else that we discussed. And we're just getting started. We don't know how it would play out, but I think for like, yeah, just to reiterate, centralized organizations, corporations created Web2, which was centralized with all its flaws, with data, your Google search results stored on Google in Google data centers, your Facebook posts stored on Facebook data centers, and Facebook making money by showing their advertisement next to content that you create. In Web3, that would be different. You would create your content, you would make money, or at least significant share of the advertisement that is showed. All your content, all your tweets, all your search queries, all your I don't know, NFTs and messages will be stored in your personal decentralized data store. But to create those protocols, we need different, different approach to. We need different types of organizations, and that's a. Just like if one takeaway I want to give to all of you is learn about DAOs, work with DAOs, try just join Discord. I don't know, search for it. It's one of the most amazing innovations that is happening right now.
So thank you for covering DAOs, the question I couldn't. And on that note, Stefania, we need a DAO panel in the next blockchain summit, or probably a DAO conference altogether. And I think I'll reiterate that it's 2 lines each probably on what is your takeaway, or how can we create a more conscious and aware ecosystem to work towards data ownership? Joachim, we start with you.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you for this question, because this is closest to my heart. It's really about we cannot achieve decentralization without thinking of an ecosystem. And I would summarize it in 3 drivers. And one is projects, the second is standard bodies and communities, and the third is shared infrastructure. And the project is really to connect us to the real world so that we explore use cases and learn the technology together. Different actors and stakeholders can meet and exchange and discuss the new technology, its implications, its necessities, etc. And then we have the shared infrastructure, which is like the outcome. It's like the protocols, which are partly there, like the decentralized identifiers, the verifiable credentials, DITCOM v2, etc. But then there's others that are kind of in the prototyping stage. So you want to make sure that a person can recover their personal data when they lost their phone, so backup services, revocations, and stuff like this. So these are the three main drivers I would think of: projects, standards and community bodies, and infrastructure.
Thank you very much. And now we come to you, Marvin.
How to say? Could you repeat the question more briefly so that
Definitely.
I can find?
Yes. So how do you think we can create a more conscious and aware ecosystem that helps us in our mission of working towards data ownership, rather, as individuals or companies? Yeah.
Yeah. I think most of the Web3 organizations at the moment, are already self-governed by tokenomic. And tokenomic is actually more, data ownership friendly economic or economic design rather than companies, because every company, they're proposed to creating applications and collecting data can only lead to making profit. There's no other way out, and they're not building for charity or common good for everybody. But the foundations and DAOs and let's say blockchain governors only aiming for creating things, making people to use, and not only going for profit. So that's a very huge difference. So the new, I'm very agreed at the idea that DAO is also an necessary organization way in Web3, and I think it is more data ownership friendly to data owners. But besides that, as we can see, almost all of the economic activities on crypto by user end is also it's majorly aiming for trading or using DeFi protocol, even though there are some games, decentralized application games. It's also for user to playground and play to earn, right? But I think in the very near future, this situation will actually change. That almost over 90% of the use cases on crypto native is building for DeFi protocol or transfer trading. I think in the near future, more and more traditional or internet applications can be hosting and using blockchain or any Web3 protocols, and this is very important. It means that the players, the crypto fans, are not only come for the crypto market, but rather to use something, maybe just a decentralized version of Twitter, or more data friendly Facebook, something like this. I think Brave, the browser Brave, make a very good example that you can actually use the blockchain to build something, and every user on Brave, what they are doing is just viewing websites and using applications. They are not come to Brave to just earn. So I think in the near future, the market will change a lot on this, and I hope that can come sooner. And what we are building is is also speeded up, to help the traditional developers to build stuff on a new web rather than an old version of web.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So thanks for your enthusiasm also with so many ideas that you had. And I think we can keep talking about it, but we have to put a hard stop on this. And I'm definitely signing up for a DAO course. I don't know about anyone else here, or Martin is as well. So thank you very much, panelists, for joining us. And it was milk and mingle and stay connected with them online and with Stepan on site. So thank you very much. Thank you.